Okay, looks like we're live, and we are live in the Amplified Facebook group. We are live on LinkedIn, and we are live on YouTube. And
Woohoo.
I will be checking the StreamYard dashboard to see if people are watching and commenting, and we can pause the conversation to answer questions if and when they come in. Hi, everybody. My name is Joran Oppelt, and I am here today with Jennifer Oppelt, who is my partner, wife, co-founder of Illustrious Consulting. Do you want to say hello?
Hello, everyone. I'm Jennifer, or Jen, most people know me as, and happy to be here today.
Yeah. Today we are kicking off the first in a series of 3 conversations that we are doing through the end of the year. Today's will be around goal setting using OKRs, which is objectives and key results. Subsequent conversations will be around team communication, team performance, team dynamics, and another one will be around effective leadership and what leadership looks like. So, and in past conversations we've had with Samaya have been around succession planning and founder syndrome and the life cycle of a business. So you can always go back on YouTube or on the Illustrious feed and find those older conversations. But today we're here to talk about goal setting, and specifically using a framework that I have come to know and love called OKRs, objectives and key results. And Jen knows this. Like, the conversations with Samaya have been interesting because Samaya helps with our marketing and is, learning about what we do as consultants, and has been really great at coming up with questions to ask, not only so that she can learn about the business, but so that we can have conversations so that people watching the conversations can also learn more about what we do. Jen has a unique, I'll say, advantage and perspective because she's been with me inside multiple consulting businesses now and helped grow and scale 2 of them now with me. And in both of them, we've used OKRs. So you are familiar with this tool and this framework already. And I would love to ask you the first question, which is, what do you know about OKRs? Like, what do you, how have you seen them used?
Yeah, I think for me, the introduction to OKRs was, when we worked together before at the consultancy, and you guys were using them with clients. And so I was, just kind of understanding about this framework from a logistics perspective and just kind of hearing about them, but didn't really understand, the impact until we actually started using them internally in that company. And part of my role was to operationalize the OKR's efforts. And so at that point, I needed to know more. I needed to understand it. The first thing is that I wanted to project plan these OKRs initiatives. And then became the conversations of OKRs are not a project plan, and I'm like, okay, well then what are they? So I had to really understand OKRs in order to help support them, not only as a team member, but as the team organizer of information. So, and that is where I think I got the opportunity to dive deeper than maybe most people would if they were just, owning objectives and key results and things like that.
Yeah.
Which OKRs, that's what those letters are about, is the objectives and key results. We'll get to that.
Right.
And then, but what I really came to love about them once we got into a few cycles is just the ease in which I was able to understand my priorities, and the ease in which I was able to say when our, creative, inspired, visionary CEO wanted to launch something new, ask what this did to my current, objectives and key results priorities. And that would cause a pause moment to say, is this something to focus on this quarter? How does it relate to our goals here? And having the empowerment to be able to say that in that moment, because these are my responsibility, right? If I'm the owner of an objective, it is my responsibility to get these things done. It is also my responsibility to talk back to a leader who may be telling me to do something different now, and at least ask the question, like, what does that do to my OKRs priorities? And that is some really empowering stuff. And that's where I really saw some magic happening. I also got to work with OKRs and another company that I worked for aside from our business and our consultancy that we worked in together. And same thing, I saw alignment across the board. I saw people understanding what others were working on for the first time ever. I saw collaboration. I saw motivation and accountability in ways that just weren't happening before implementing such a structure. So I've been able to see it work lots of amazing ways through the years.
Well, I think this conversation's over. You just covered it all. I was going to say, I know that every COO or chief of staff or, product manager listening to this hears you say, I wanted to take our OKR set and operationalize it. I wanted to turn this into like what we do, right? Our task list. And that's not what it was. And you had to learn that the hard way. And I've seen a lot of people have to learn that the hard way, right? And the question is, and, I was going to ask like, okay, so if, what value did you then find in it? If it's not a project plan, if it's not a task list, then what value did you find? And that's what you said was it's a way to help prioritize. It's a way to talk back to leadership, a feedback loop. It's a way to align and have visibility and accountability. It's all of those things. So I'll ask you a different question. If it's not a project plan, then what is it?
It's more than anything to me, a system of measurement is what comes up. First of all, there's the alignment piece so that we all know what are we working towards, what are the goals that we're looking to hit. And then it is like it's a way to measure whether we're doing those things or not. Of course, there are to-do lists and there are project plans, but those are aside from your actual, forming and grading of the OKRs. So did that answer your question? I kind of lost sight of the start of it.
Yeah. A system of measurement is what I heard you say. And I would add, not only is it a way to measure, it's a way to have a conversation about how you measure. And if you need to pivot and measure things differently over the next 90 days, it's an opportunity to open the door to that conversation too.
Yeah.
So yeah, not only is it a ruler, but it's what do you call those in architecture school where it's like it's multiple rulers in one, right? So yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, what did you want to ask?
Yeah, I've got a couple of things. So I know I would just love to hear a little bit more around what you like about the OKRs and why you like it so much. And I'm just going to say that I can remember a time that you weren't as enthused about OKRs. So what changed for you and what changed for you over the years and why are you such a fan now?
Well, I will have to. I have to say that that's not new. Like that's me not being enthused about having to learn a new tool is not a surprise, right? Just whatever. I'm a man. I'm a Taurus. I'm a Pitta. Whatever it is that's like it got me kind of stuck in my ways and like I don't like change or rapid surprise change, and the learning curve of having a new tool or a new system is sometimes frustrating for me. And so when I had to bring in, and it was kind of like midway through the initial consulting business, where I was familiarizing myself with a lot of different aspects of the toolbox already, and I have a feeling people have that same sense of overwhelm, especially if you open the door to something like visual thinking or management tools or team performance or whatever. All of a sudden you're down a rabbit hole, and you're like, oh yeah, well, there's game storming over here, and there's liberating structures over here, and there's traction over here, and there's it's just like, it can be a lot, and you kind of don't know where to look. So in addition to having a new tool, it was a new tool alongside a bunch of already new tools that I was feeling I needed to learn. Initially, it felt, I think, like you, it felt ambiguous to me. Like, if it's not this, then what is it? Okay, well, if it's not this other thing, then what is it, right? I've come to understand OKRs as a map, as a way to orient and navigate through a framework or a system or a strategy together as a team, a way to know where the compass rose is and have the team facing a certain direction and leaning in a certain direction over a certain period of time. That's how I orient now to OKRs. I really did used to orient to it more as a list of things to do, or maybe more connected to visioning than goal setting, or and it is a way to measure. The key results are that as part of the system, they are a way to measure. But I think maybe I focused on the parts of the OKR set initially, and understandably so, because I needed to grasp it as a tool. And now, since it's been 8 years since I've been working with them, I really more so look at them as that visioning and goal setting tool, and I look at them as a integral and holistic system, as opposed to, this is a way to talk about our results, this is a list of our goals. It really is, in my mind now, years later, a way to simplify the complexity in the business. That's really the outcome that OKRs for me provides with clients now, is that we've got, and I've talked about this before, I've got a client that says, we've got these 11 things which we've labeled as must-win battles, and we've got to do these things this year. Nobody can manage 11 must-win battles in their brain every day. It's not sustainable. So you've got to break, like we talk about in visionary leadership, you've got to break the big thing into smaller things. And that's what OKRs helps you do, is simplify your must-win battles down into, okay, what are the 3 things I need to do this quarter over the next 90 days in order to tactically, win some of these battles, so I can make some real progress. I also notice that somebody's tuned in and is watching. I see a little eyeball with a number 1 next to it. So some person is watching this conversation right now. And I just want to say thanks for tuning in, and invite whoever you are to leave a comment in the section. We're streaming now to Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube. So wherever you're watching, please leave us a comment, say hello, let us know how you're doing. So Jen, did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. You're talking about doing OKRs for 8 years, and this kind of evolution of your understanding of it, and how, you've kind of shifted your thinking around it. Through those years, I know that you've done a lot of reading and research. And can you tell me some of the resources and books that have really inspired you?
I can. And that is actually why we're here today on this call, because Sumaya and I decided that we needed to revisit what we did last year, which was talk about some of our favorite books in the in the Illustrious library, and I know we did a really extensive book share. Maybe it was 2 years ago. But I love books. You can't see it in my background now in our new house here in Asheville, but we've got tons of books. I love books, and I love talking about books. So the idea for this conversation, this series of conversations, was to share some books. And not as many as some of the other topics, but there are a few books on OKRs that I do recommend. I will start with, and I've got them right here conveniently. I will start by saying this Measure What Matters by John Doerr is hailed as the definitive book on OKRs. And I will say to that, it's okay. It's a lot of case studies and stories and really high level thinking about goal setting. And for me, as somebody looking to implement OKRs, that's exactly what it gave me. It gave me a high level understanding of what OKRs were, how they originated, like how they came out of Intel, and where they, how they originated even further back than that, like with Peter Drucker as management by objectives, and like the history of how they formed. And yeah, that's all great and trivia to know, but what it didn't do is tell me how to apply them either internally in the organization, or better yet, for my situation, with clients, with people I was coaching and consulting with. So it's okay if you want the high level overview, it's great. But then I found Christina Wadke's book, Radical Focus. And then Radical Focus is written by someone who did OKRs with people in organizations, with startups, with huge companies across the board, what she learned, what the mistakes she made, what she observed, the effects and outcomes of successfully doing OKRs, how long you had to do them in order to, achieve a certain outcome. All of the things that were burning questions for me that were left ambiguous by reading Measure What Matters were all answered by reading Radical Focus. So I would say you could probably just cut to the chase and read Radical Focus and be okay.
Yeah.
The third resource I would share would be Ben Lamort's The OKRs Field Book. Now, this is on Wiley, and it's written for people who are doing OKRs coaching. So it's for people who are training other people how to do OKRs, how to set goals in the organization. And I would say, it looks like somebody else is watching. Thanks for tuning in. Please leave a comment wherever you're watching. Looks like Pam is on Facebook. Thanks for watching, Pam. Leave us a comment wherever you are. Tell us how you're doing today, and if you have questions about setting goals. But that third book, the OKRs Field Book, I mean, that he has a section in it. This is really valuable to me, what Ben calls the 10 universal deployment parameters. I'd like that to be something simpler and sexier, but the 10 universal deployment parameters are really important when talking to whoever it is internal, your internal, what I call accountable champion in the organization, responsible for rolling out, deploying, not enforcing, but managing the OKR set every quarter. And again, that might be your COO or your HR or your chief of staff, whoever it is that's managing the OKRs. This is what they need to know. And it's questions like, at what level are we going to set the OKRs? Like at the company level, the team level, how many are we going to set? Got the list of them here. Like, how long will the OKR cycle be? How will we score them? It's important to have that conversation beforehand rather than after. What does we usually do a scale of like 1 to 10. What does a 5 mean when talking about this key result? Does it mean that the project is launched, the initiative is underway, or does it mean that we've begun conversations about it, right? Like defining done, right? Painting done for each key result, and how you'll measure it 90 days later needs to happen on day 1, not day 90. So, types and milestones and, how are you going to circulate and socialize the OKR set? It's an important question to have answered ahead of time. For us, at Illustrious, we do, you can look at our website and see them. We do graphic recordings of the OKR set. It's going to it look like a mountain range or a beehive or an anthill or, whatever metaphor your team works with, but it's going to have emblazoned in bold letters your top 3 to 5 initiatives that you're working on over the next 90 days. And that is a poster, full high-res color poster that you can hang in your conference room and kitchen areas. And I've seen this all throughout the walls of companies, and that again is just another visual tool to get everybody leaning in the same direction every 90 days. You stop somebody in the hall and they will know what the top 3 business goals, not just their goals, the goals of the business are for that quarter. That's invaluable, right? So having that visual reinforcement is how we recommend to deploy and socialize the OKR set. But just deciding how that's going to happen, again, something to decide beforehand rather than later.
I was just thinking about how, I haven't read Radical Focus, but I definitely have read Measure What Matters. That's what I dug into initially, which I think a lot of people do, that are just starting to be curious about OKRs and what it's all about. And I agree that, there is a lot of just storytelling in that, which is interesting to somebody like me who likes stories, and there is, some of the nuts and bolts functional stuff in there too. But I understand what you're saying from a coach and facilitator standpoint. There's so much more out there. And you and I have talked about Radical Focus. I will say one thing that I really did enjoy is the website for Measure What Matters and some short videos, which I think were really impactful for me to just kind of grasp an understanding. But one thing that I was curious about, these are the resources that you've, read and obviously worked into your work with clients. What resources do you give your clients when they're either starting OKRs with you or maybe they're thinking about doing OKRs? What resources do you have?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Because in addition to these 3 books, I was going to say, and I'm working on one, right? Like we've got this book that's in the works that has started out as my tips and tricks. It's called OKRs 1.0. It's actually on the website. You could download it. It's for organizations doing OKRs for the first time, and what they can expect. Now that has grown, as you can imagine, over time, and we've added to it. And just like any of the books we publish, is like years and years go by and we keep stuffing stuff in it and then reorganizing it, and it gets to be this big thing. And now we've done OKRs successfully with so many people that we've got these success stories and case studies, and not so successfully. We've got, it's like we've seen them fail too, and we know why they failed. So there's those stories too that now we're going to add to it as an appendix, as a section at the end around case studies. And so there'll be an OKRs 1.0 book available through Illustrious soon. For now, you can download the PDF, the ebook through the website. That's something that we give to clients when we're just starting out. We give them a lot of teaching and training tools that are visual, a lot of diagrams. We've got a nice big graphic record that we supply them with that is kind of the anatomy of the OKRs and what they can expect. But the resources, I'd say the most valuable resource we give somebody just starting out with OKRs is a nice long onboarding ramp. Like we just take our time and we talk about it and why it's important. We are careful to secure buy-in from leadership because this stuff has to come from the top down. Everybody's got to believe in it. And, I need the CEO in the room when these things are launched to be able to, cut to for 2 minutes to say a few words on why it's important that we're starting out on this goal setting initiative and what it may mean for the company. It can't feel like it's happening in a vacuum, even though sometimes an OKR set can be tested, let's say by the marketing department. Like, let's test OKRs first with this department over here and make sure it works and see what happens. And then we can do it business wide. Like, that's fine. but there needs to be buy-in and understanding from everybody as to why they're doing it and what they can expect. So I would say, yeah, nice long onboarding with multiple stakeholders throughout the organization involved in the conversations, you know, and specifically around things they've tried before and what happened when they tried that. And, you know, a lot of sharing with them how other companies have found success with this tool. And yeah, setting them up for that success by providing them with ultimate clarity, you know, and maybe a shift in mindset around how they're going to need to consider, like you said, that feedback mechanism, that talking back to leadership piece, or the visibility and transparency and accountability piece. Like if that's not culturally there already, then that might be something we rub up against. So there's a lot of like preparing for OKRs that happens before implementing the OKRs.
Yeah. Now that's really good context. And I like how you kind of put that in as the part of the resources that you give that preparation piece before you even really get started. So what I'm hearing is that there's this preparation phase for doing OKRs that needs to be well thought out. And then there's this like really juicy visioning space where you get to talk about the goals and like get really aspirational and, you know, think big. And then you get to kind of get nuts and bolts and you get to kind of break it down and exactly how do we get there. And this is where you're saying that graphic, you know, record can be really nice to have at that moment, you know, so like you're walking away with this like vision of what's possible over this next quarter or whatever the time frame is. But like, I can see the potential, and I've seen it happen myself, you know, of like, okay, we've done all of this amazing goal setting, and we're going to meet again next quarter.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. Yeah.
Avoid the like, you set the follow, you know, the next quarterly meeting up on the calendar and everybody gets there and they're like shuffling through their notes like, oh crap, did I do anything?
What did we commit to?
Yeah. How do you keep it like going? How do you keep it motivated? How do you keep people accountable to this amazing work once it's been implemented?
Yeah. That happens by not just setting OKRs on day one and having your next meeting 90 days later. You know, I mentioned how people fail at OKRs. That is one of the top ways you can fail, is by setting your OKRs and then not meeting until 90 days later and saying, okay, how do we do, guys? It's unreasonable and it's unsustainable. So we do what Christina Wadke recommends in her book, and that is the weekly, what she calls Foursquare meeting. It's called Foursquare because there's a 2x2 matrix. There's 4 quadrants. And you check in around what your priorities are for the week, and you know what your forecast for the next 4 weeks looks like, and what your confidence level is in the overall OKR set that you're working on, and why it's down this week. What happened in the business that made your confidence go down, you know, or why it's up. We just won this big thing, and now I'm more confident that we can get this 90-day goal in place than I was yesterday, you know, last week. And the most important feature of the Foursquare is the health metrics. We encourage people to focus on a set of 6 initial health metrics to measure for the first time out with OKRs. And that can be things like team health, financial health, stakeholder health, product health, you name it. And it's a way to just give a green, yellow, red stoplight measurement from week to week on how's your team doing, right? How's your team doing with achieving these goals? How's our sales pipeline doing this week? You know, how is stakeholder can be everything from vendor to board members to to partners. So it could be how are our partners, reacting to this really wildly ambitious or highly specific goal we set for ourselves this quarter. So the stoplight system allows you to just do a quick check-in week to week. And then what I always coach is to look at the reds. You know, red lights should be I mean, everything should stop and all hands on deck. Like, okay, sales has a red light this week. What's happening? What obstacle needs to be cleared for them? And then at the end of the 90 days, you can go back and kind of keep track of where reds happened. Let's say all the reds happened in one department. That's worth looking at. Let's say reds happened across all departments when something happened in either the world or the marketplace. Like, that's worth looking at. Oh, are we that highly affected by when X happens, our business shuts down, right? Like, just look at the reds at the end of the quarter two, and that can be really informative. And what I always tell people is that the reds in the previous quarter should inform the way you talk about future OKRs for the next quarter, because you should be addressing those as much as you can.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up the health metrics, because I think that is something that isn't necessarily done with all people who do OKRs. I think sometimes it can just be the straightforward, okay, we've got these goals and we're going to try to meet them. But these health metrics, and I know a little bit more about this than even you spoke to, are not even necessarily related to OKRs. These are additional factors to be looking at to make sure that you don't have unintended consequences or unexpected consequences, or just even if they're not associated at all, like you said, could just be things happening in the world that you didn't see coming. But if you have some like really ambitious budget goals, for example, that you need to address, well, you need to look, how is that affecting morale? How is that affecting your end product? And continuing to measure how these things that you're working on are actually impacting the business in whole. And so I think that those health metrics are super important and not something that everybody does with OKRs. So
yeah. And, to get profitable, you might need to, streamline your team, pare down your team and let some people go. And that might bring your financial health into the green, right? But then if your team, then, like you said, morale goes down, right, and down into the red, that's something to be aware of, right? How they're interconnected and how there's interplay between the metrics.
Yeah, exactly. I think I want to know about OKRs for the first time. What are some of the things that people who are thinking about implementing OKRs can do to be successful? And what are some of the situations in which you might point out that somebody should consider not doing OKRs internally themselves on their own? Are there any of those that you can speak to?
I mean, I mentioned one already, and that is if the leadership at the very top isn't bought in to this, if this is something that one of the executive team members or even one of the direct reports maybe thinks is a good idea to try, I would not recommend doing OKRs. I mean, OKRs not only requires everybody to participate and be involved and show up for one another in a really highly transparent and accountable way, but it requires the people at the top to lead by example. As with anything in organizations, it requires the top leadership to model it and cast a clear vision of what we're doing and why it's important. And if the leader, I'll say the leader, right, hasn't done that, this is going to feel like homework. This is going to feel like extra work. This is going to feel like something you've been told you need to do that is distracting from your other work. And it may still feel like that for a couple rounds, right? It may feel like that as you do it the first couple of times, because, like I said in the beginning, like the learning curve on any tool is great, or can be great. But I tell you, once you do grasp it, what I've seen with organizations that really do them well, and the ones that do them well do them over the long term, things get simpler, things get easier, things get lighter. It's easier to pivot. It's easier to, like you said, know what your priorities are. It's easier to give feedback to people, not only your direct reports, but also your manager, right? Your boss. It's easier. It empowers you and equips you with the vocabulary to talk about the goals and how to get there in a way that you can have it every week, every day, as opposed to, like you said, like only every quarter at our planning sessions, or only annually at our strategic visioning session, right? This is like, you're in it every day and you're thinking differently, and that helps it become really simple, right? And it just helps narrow the field on the things that you're prioritized on. I'd say too that if you're not equipped with a culture, so at the top there's that, but then also culturally, if you're not equipped with a culture that is ready to lean in the same direction and be accountable to each other and support one another and call each other out and, be radically honest, then I would maybe do some culture work first and say, guys, y'all, it's important that we set goals and can get to those goals. But first, we've got to be able to team together, right? Before we have a conversation about goals. So I would work on that first. And that goes back to, any of the basic kind of models of like Tuckman and, forming, storming, norming, or, the Drexler-Sibbett, the Grove model of team performance, which is formation and trust building and goal clarification and commitment. Like, you've got to have the trust in place first before you move to the goal clarification step. So if you have not done the trust building work, if you do not have a culture of openness and, readiness and possibility, don't do OKRs yet. Get the culture first and then knuckle down on the goal setting.
Yeah, this definitely connects to what you're saying on culture. It's also about setting your team up for success and psychological safety. That I think about, like, some of the positions that workers are put in sometimes, especially maybe mid-leadership, mid-level leaders, where they've been kind of given this goal, but they haven't been given the resources or access to the resources, or an understanding of the path to get there and who to talk to. So maybe they're tasked with, with hiring, a certain number of positions, but they haven't been really given the job descriptions or the salary bands or the budget or access to the hiring pipeline. That they're just kind of given this ambiguous goal about filling these roles. Can you speak to ways that you've seen maybe a culture that isn't set up for success in that way of empowering people to actually get these things done, but has made a shift in moving towards more empowerment through doing the OKRs process and kind of like poking holes in the whole goal setting, model?
Sure. Yeah. I worked with somebody recently, a team recently, who, do I wish that we had done culture work first and gotten some of that stuff out of the way? Absolutely. But we, for whatever reason, they wanted to go full force with OKRs. And, along the way, we provided some coaching to them, to the people who were the accountable champions for each of the objectives. We provided some OKRs coaching, I think it was like every other week. And that helped kind of weave in, there was this parallel effort to get people moving the needle on the culture, being a little more open and honest, being able to speak up, asking for what they needed, just like you just described, like asking for the access to the spreadsheet so that they knew the things they needed to know and could make the decisions they were being asked to make. But they weren't being given access to the resources because there wasn't that level of trust yet. And and the leader was really holding on to the reins, and there was a little bit of founder syndrome happening too, and like not letting go and moving away from the hub and spoke model. So I would say that in parallel, we made some significant headway on the culture, and that they started talking to each other, and the cross-functional nature of OKRs on their own gets you talking to departments you normally wouldn't talk to. Gets you communicating and understanding parts of the business that you had no idea about before, but now you're working on this cross-functional effort to get this KPI down from 30% to 20%, and so you've got to actively engage with people and communicate in Slack and ask for updates on things. So just that inherent increase in communication helps with culture, but there's nothing like actual being able to hear, to give and receive feedback, or being able to even as a leader, being able to hear the things that you can do better, right? Not just an anonymous 360 where you read feedback in a PDF and say, I wish they'd do this, but like sitting in a room with your team and hearing it from them and having it be okay, like having it land in a really good place and saying, yes, I hear you, I'm committed to improving that, or what else do you need from me to feel supported? Like those kind of shifts were starting to happen, and that was the real promising thing, because the goal setting was just the beginning.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing that's really great around OKRs, the check-ins, like the Foursquare, but also is present with a lot of people who do stand-ups and that kind of thing, is just this thing on the agenda that says obstacles, and just clearly speaking obstacles out loud, whether that be to your direct report or your coworkers, just being able to speak about obstacles, I think is one of the most life-changing things that teams can do, because that is when you highlight like, oh, I would have done this task, but I don't have access to the spreadsheet. That's an obstacle for me, or it's getting bottlenecked because I'm waiting a week for approval on this document,
right,
that kind of thing. Those are obstacles that I've just seen like a lot of magic in just speaking obstacles.
Yeah, and if they're happening week after week after week, then there's a larger issue, right?
Yeah.
But to touch on what you suggested earlier, if we have a meeting and say, let's do a thing, and then we don't meet until 30 days later, somebody's going to look at you and say, why didn't you get the thing done? Mm-hmm. Right? And you can say, well, because there was this thing in my way, or I didn't have access to this, or, of course you want to not be blaming and finger pointing, but people need to be empowered to ask for things and equipped for things. And that's what I think happens in those, when you're checking in more frequently in the weekly Foursquares. People are, speaking up more. I can't, more times than I can count, I've had to say, is there anything you'd like to ask for? Is there any help you'd like to ask for from somebody on this call or outside this room? Is there anything you need from anybody in order to clear that obstacle? Now's the time to ask for help. We're all here, right? And just setting that, like doing that as a muscle. And I would only have to do that for like a couple months. And then all of a sudden I heard the managers saying, as the managers took over the call, they'd say things like, do you need any help with that? Do you need any other help with that? Is there anybody that can help you get that done? It was just like, it was learned behavior. It was, it was like a new muscle for people then. And then people started to be able to ask for it. So again, back to modeling it and being the kind of leader that really values empowering the team and equipping the team and having the team aligned. That all needs to be baked into the goal setting. You can't skip the trust building process and go to goal setting. You can't skip the goal setting any more than you can skip the goal setting stage and jump right to committing to a direction. Like, you have to know where you're going first before you put your foot on the gas. So, if you can't get the culture aligned or bought in, then I think take those steps along the way as much as you can to encourage that kind of behavior.
Great. So we are looking at just about a month and a half till the end of 2023, and a lot of people are either, write in their thoughts around 2024 or know that they need to put some attention on next year's planning. If somebody here is listening to this today and I was like, oh gosh, I really need to do something more structured like OKRs, or maybe it's something else, I'm not really sure, but I can tell that there is an opportunity here if I can just get some structure and cadence and alignment around goal setting. What would you recommend are some immediate next steps they could do?
Well, here, hold on. Let me do the little fun trick here, which is the first thing I can think of is to give us a call. If you're wanting to get the team aligned or leaning in the same direction, it may not be OKRs. You might not be ready for OKRs, but if there's some kind of team improvement meeting, or maybe even just being exposed to like the team performance model or the life cycle of a business, or what, there might be just some kind of model that can be introduced that is a catalytic conversation starter that gets people thinking about leaning in the same direction. We've got a toolbox full of those, and I'd love to have a conversation with anybody who's feeling like, oh my God, yeah, my team needs some of this stuff. Like, these tools sound great, and I think we could really benefit from it because we're experiencing X or Y or Z, and we want to not be anymore, right? Just reach out and schedule a discovery call. Quick 30 minutes is usually all it takes. And we love to find fun ways to work together. So that's one thing.
Before you move on from that, like, as your wife and business partner who's often in the next room when you're on these calls, I will say that Joran gives an immense amount of value in a 30-minute discovery call. I don't think there's anybody who's talked to you who hasn't left the call alone with some ideas and feeling more empowered.
Yeah, I don't hold back. I can't hold back. I kind of geek out in that way, like if I'm on a call with somebody and we're talking about something, immediately that support, and that I can't not be coaching and supporting somebody. It's just like it kicks in right away. So again, schedule a call. And what else? I mean, just be thinking about how you can keep it simple, how you can simplify not only your goals, but the aspects of the business that are feeling overwhelming. Think about the ways that you can articulate or communicate your vision or the direction that you want your team to make. Teams want to be led. And I know that we're in a culture sometimes of like companies I've just worked with who feel like, oh, I used to come from this big corporate entity and I've started this new company now, and it's not going to be like that. It's not going to be top-down leadership, command and control, and we're not going to manage people that way, and I'm not going to be that kind of boss. I'm not going to be that kind of executive, which is great. Don't be an asshole, right? Like, don't be that kind of executive. That's fine, but people still need to be led. They need to be managed. Their expectations need to be managed. The vision needs to be managed. They need to be invited into that vision. They need to see themselves as part of that vision. So that's the kind of management and leadership that can't go away. Like, you can't outsource that. You can't leave that behind. You can't say, oh, that's how the corporate guys do it and we're not going to do that. No, everybody needs to do that because that's a human thing. Mm-hmm. So keep it simple and think about how you can articulate and communicate your vision and invite your team into it. The way we do OKRs and goal setting is one way to do that, right? But it's there are countless ways to do that. So I would just say, consider whatever tool you're using, consider how you can make it simple and inclusive and visual, because that's like, I like visual, right? That's the way we work. So I would say, how can you make it visual? What's that?
That's how a lot of people remember things, is when they can see it.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. This was a great conversation. I always like having conversations with you. And and this is one I like to have. So the next one is going to be on, I think, team communication. Oh, the leadership's next. Okay, so we'll do effective leadership next and look for that one in a couple of weeks. Thank you so much to everyone who tuned in. The two people who, Pam and the second person, I don't know who the second person is watching, but says, I'm just listening while I get some work done over here. So thank you to all of you who have watched live and hung out with us on a Friday afternoon. And thank you to all of you who are going to watch the replay. Thanks for tuning in. Again, if you have any questions, put them in the comments, reach out to us. You can email me at joran@illustri.us and set up a call. And it says, it's me, haha, and I don't see who you are because it just says Facebook user. So it says, Facebook user says, it's me, I love you both, but I love you back, Facebook user, even though I don't know who you are. And it's Billy Mays. Of course it's Billy Mays.
Hi, Billy.
Hi, Billy. Thanks for tuning in, man. So again, reach out if you've got questions, and or if you know anyone who's struggling with goal setting or team alignment, or needs somebody to just come in and have a conversation or help, let us know. Okay, thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Enjoy your Friday. Happy Friday.